Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special Rangers review podcast. I'm Derek Clark, and I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Brian Howieson to talk about his book that he's released, Rangers Football Club 1998 to 2015, A Descent into Chaos, a Resultant Chaos, and an emergence from chaos also. Brian, thank you very much for coming on and having a chat with us.
You're very welcome, Derek. You're absolutely very welcome. I do admire what you guys are doing in Rangers Review, and this is a pleasure to talk to you, so thank you for having me on.
No, it's a pleasure for us as well, and it's great to have you on after a couple of failed attempts. We're speaking off air where it has been a pretty busy few weeks for us here at the Rangers Review with managerial change, but it's great to have you on finally to talk about this very interesting book that you've published, Brian. I'm intrigued to find out more about it. But for maybe anyone that's tuning in for the first time, but maybe are unfamiliar with your work and who you are, can you give us a little bit of an insight into you, Brian, and what inspired you to write this book?
I'm a business academic, Derek. I'm a professor at Stirling Management School. And my main interest is in leadership and strategy. I'm quite interested in organisations. And I recall I grew up, I used to have a season ticket at the Brox. I grew up supporting Rangers. And it's always interesting me. And I remember, 10 years ago, sitting in my office in the university watching the press conference by Duff and Phelps thinking, just what is going on here? What is going on here now, Derek? Perhaps we're curious or whatever. I just thought, what is going on here? Mm-hmm. What's the story? And then that was on the 16th of February. And then Paul Clark and David Whitehouse published their first administrator's report on the 5th of April. And it's there in Company's House. And when you look at it, it gives the key highlights of Rangers Football Club. And when you look at this, you think, I said, this is just what is going on here. This is when you consider the history and the pedigree of this football club. So I've always been quite curious to try and make sense. And perhaps what we do as academics, Derek, we try to sense make, we try to analyse, then hopefully we try and narrate it to a public audience. So the idea was I wanted to try and write a book to try and just say, look, this is what I think happened pre-Craig Whyte, from Sir David Murray to Craig Whyte to Green to recovery and then to regime change. And that's where, in my view, renewal started on the 6th of March 2015. So maybe it's a history book, Derek, and maybe in 100 years' time when people look back in the history of Scottish football. This was a huge story, Derek. This was not just another PLC going into administration. What really happened here? Corporate mismanagement affected the lives and culture of many, and the story's still going on to this date. So it's just a hugely interesting story, not just in Scottish football, but Scottish society, Scottish culture, corporate leadership, corporate strategy. It's just really interesting in my view.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, it's a long time in the making to get it to this point. Brian, what was the sort of challenges and things that you faced over the course of writing it? Was it a few hurdles you had to overcome?
Well, I had a day job, and it was quite a demanding day job, so I did this in my spare time. But what I will say is I'd always wanted to write the book, and I used to work at the University of Dundee, and I got very, very friendly with a very senior gentleman called Craig in DC Thompson. And I kind of said to him on the various train journeys, there's a book in this, there's a book in this. Craig invited me into DC Thompson, and I met with a guy called Steve Finnan, who does the football nostalgia books, and they absolutely got this. And they said, this book needs to be written. So basically, what had happened this year was I submitted the manuscript on the 30th. So it took me about 2 or 3 years to write it, and I wanted to wait till after the Craig Whyte trial, because the Craig Whyte trial was in 2017. So effectively, I started writing after that. I submitted the manuscript to DC Thompson. Roddy Forsyth did an excellent forward. We'd agreed to cover. We'd even booked Waterstones in Glasgow for the launch. We'd agreed royalties, but DC Thompson pulled out. Just
Wow.
very short. Yeah, quite.
Yeah.
Quite. And they just decided, although I wrote to them, they said, no, we're not doing this. So basically, that was a bit of a blow, a bit of a difficult year.
Yeah.
But during the writing of, one other thing as well, writing, I met many people. I met bloggers, vloggers, journalists, lawyers, and I met a wide variety of people who are still very much interested in what happened here. So to cut a long story short, I got in bed with an organisation called Publish Nation. The owner is a Glaswegian from Cessnock, Ibrox area, based in London, and we self-published on Amazon. So I wanted to get it out there, not because I was looking for financial gain, but I wanted to get it out there as my small contribution, Derek, to what I think happened. And in the same way that Stevie Clifford and you guys contribute to the literature, I wanted in my own way just to put it out there to say, well, look, I've never said my work is brilliant, but I think I've got the key points in this book, and people may choose to read it or not. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's So, but again, people say, "Oh, you've written a book, Brian," but kind of academics maybe, as you guys have as well. We've got writing skills. We tend to gravitate to this kind of work. So, I don't think I was anything special in writing a book. I just wanted to try and understand what happened.
Yeah, absolutely. The fact that you look all the way back to 1998, Brian, what was it? The significance of starting it from there? Is that where you felt that the downfall began?
Well, yes, because at the time, that summer of 2012, I mean, it was just really, we had not really seen anything like this before.
Mm-hmm.
And in many respects, Craig Whyte was portrayed as a pantomime villain, Derek.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone thought it's all Craig Whyte's fault. And at the time, I thought I would start with Craig Whyte, and I probably didn't want to touch Sir David Murray, not because I didn't dislike him, but I thought, but actually, when you try to understand the story as I did, I had to look at the context of Rangers when Craig Whyte bought Rangers from David Murray.
Yeah.
And so that was the backdrop. And once you start digging into the backdrop, I mean, Sir David was there for 10 years, 88 to 98. Then perhaps I've made this point before that when Walter Smith left in 1998, maybe it was a steady hand that was left. It just did start to seem to go a wee bit wrong since then.
Mm-hmm.
And then Hugh Adams spoke in 2000 about this club's going to go bankrupt and the spending. There was a share issues in the year 2000, year 2004. And it occurred to me that I think you could probably, the administration and subsequent liquidation of the company, not the club, and I'm going to say that again, of the company, not the club, probably could go back to, the genesis may go back to around about 1998, Derek. So that's where I started the story, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. You said there that the company, not the club. It's an issue, of course. I mean, when Rangers often play different teams in Scotland, it's often a chant from opposition supporters and what have you, as you can expect when Rangers go to these grounds. But what did you find from your research in the book in terms of identifying that the club and company sort of argument that still rages on to this day?
Well, it's false in my view. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but it took me a long time to try and understand what was going on here. The first thing, the language was very casual. I mean, I spoke to Chris Jack about this because, I mean, the Herald of that summer had said, born 1872, died in 2012. And actually, it was pretty irresponsible for a so-called broadsheet to say that about Rangers Football Club. It really was. And I counter that by saying this year, the same broadsheet newspaper says that Rangers were celebrating their 150th birthday. So I think there was some editorial confusion in the Herald. But the language around the Rangers was a bit casual and a bit lazy. And so there's a clear distinction between the football club and there's about 5 or 6 different companies associated with the football club. Now, what helped me significantly was people like Chris Graham, who were writing about this. And there's a variety of Court of Session judges, lords no less, Lord Glennie, who himself was a corporate lawyer, and then was Smith, they're very, very clear that a company operates a club. A company operates a club. And what happened was, it was the company, the PLC, that went into administration, and it was the PLC that actually went into liquidation process. Now, of note, Derek, the said PLC is still in the liquidation process. So really, what has died? Nothing. And the example I give to many people, you may have noticed a few weeks ago, the Edinburgh Film House, the cinema on Lothian Road, and its sister cinema in Aberdeen, they did not go into administration or bust. It was the charity that owned them that went into administration. Now, if that charity, which has a Scottish company number, does not come out of administration, another company will come along and buy the Playhouse and the Belmont Cinema in Aberdeen. And it will still be the Playhouse and the Belmont Cinema. In the same way, of course, it's Rangers Football Club. And people are getting really caught up in this, actually. And I think they need to, it's silly. A company operates a club. The company undoubtedly got into financial difficulty. It went into administration, but I'm very clear in my head, as most people are, I suggest, Derek, the club survives, and it was bought by Sefco Scotland Limited, which became the Rangers Football Club Limited, that is now operated by the Rangers International Football Club PLC, and the AGM of the said PLC was held yesterday, as you know.
Yeah. You mentioned Craig Whyte there. David Murray, of course, infamously sold his shares for £1. He did say he was duped. Do you go along with that from the research you carried out, Brian?
No. I remember the documentary at the time, The Men Who Sold the Jerseys. They interviewed Ian Fraser, who wrote the book Shredded By, about the collapse of RBS. And Ian Fraser makes a point that actually you've got to get up pretty early to catch out Sir David Murray. I've not met Sir David Murray, but from the available evidence, I don't think he was duped. What came out in Craig Whyte's trial of 2017, that Murray International Holdings Limited, the parent company of the company that operated the football club, Murray International Holdings were desperate to get short of the Rangers Football Club PLC. Desperate. In fact, the buyers for, i.e. representing Craig Whyte, said in court that they have never seen a case where the seller was trying to get rid of this. Sir David, his world collapsed in terms of Murray International Holdings, and basically what had happened was Murray International Holdings had always banked with the Bank of Scotland. Now, what I think is quite interesting, Gordon Brown was the UK Prime Minister. He did not want the Bank of Scotland to go under on his watch, Scottish Prime Minister, Scottish Bank. Gordon Brown instructed the then chairman of Lloyds TSB, you will buy Bank of Scotland or HBOS. The chairman said yes, so that then became the Lloyds Banking Group. The Lloyds Banking Group had a good look at their accounts, and they look at Murray International Holdings, and for goodness sake, Murray International Holdings owed Lloyds almost £1 billion, Derek. £1 billion. And that's a key point. One of the things I have learned from this book is that very few of us, I don't think, realised how many companies were in the kind of chain of command between the Rangers Football Club PLC that went into administration and Murray International Holding. There was about 3 or 4 companies in there. Moreover, did we realise how exposed the football club was to Murray International Holdings owning Lloyds £1 billion? So Lloyds said to Sir David, and I think this was very clear in the court case, okay, Sir David, you made your name in steel. If you want to keep your steel company, you will sell the Rangers Football Club PLC by next April. You will sell it. And Sir David wanted to keep the steel, and why would he not? That's where he started. So basically, he was quite keen to get the Rangers Football Club PLC off his hands.
Yeah.
And it just so happens that Craig Whyte came along, and there was no due diligence by Murray on Craig Whyte. Craig Whyte was willing to pay off the £18 million to Lloyd's. So, and again, banks were going under, Derek. Northern Rock. So Lloyd's had inherited this debt, and they thought, we need to get our money back as well. So they were desperate to get all the money back to protect themselves as a bank. So there was this real perfect storm at play. And at the same time, because of the EBTs, the potential in HMRC are also a significant actor in the story. HMRC, there was a potential liability for the PLC to 50, 60, 70 million pounds from HMRC. Who was going to buy the PLC that operated the club when the PLC might have a potential liability? So really, Rangers Football Club and the parent company, the Rangers Football Club PLC, was not in a very good place at the time, round about 2010, 2011. And perhaps us as fans, as stakeholders, we were probably in denial.
Yeah.
We were probably in a few people were a bit worried throughout the noughties, but I don't think Murray will sort it out, or Craig Whyte, he's a billionaire, he'll sort it out. And, there was quite a lot of denial. And I think one of the things from the book is all football clubs and all supporters and stakeholders should be very clear who owns the club, what their agenda is, and how exposed their club is to that agenda. And this is going on in England quite a lot really at the moment with who's actually buying these guys' club. Anyway, I digress. So yeah.
No,
I don't think he was duped, in my view.
Yeah, and of course everyone remembers the Valentine's Day on 2012, him standing on the steps, Craig issuing the notice that the club was going into administration. Can you remember back to that? In terms of Craig Whyte, does he shoulder most of the blame for the demise, Brian, of what happened from there on and from taking over?
No. I have said I give him the benefit of the doubt, and I gave a public lecture at the University of Stirling on this, and this caused a wee bit of angst. And I'm very willing for any of your listeners to do talks for you. Do I give him the benefit of the doubt? I genuinely think he was never going to be around, in my view, for the long term, nor was Charles Green. When Craig Whyte bought the company had a revenue, i.e. what was coming in, of about 35 million quid. But the problem was there was about 44, 45 million quid going out the door. So there was a deficit in the company of 10 million quid. Now, I think he gambled on two things. He gambled on Mr. McCoy's team getting into the Champions League. And he also gambled on the first tier tax tribunal all coming before Christmas. The problem was both those gambles did not play out. So, for example, by the end of August, Rangers at the time were out of both the Champions League, Derek, and also the UEFA Cup. So there was no additional revenue. So Craig Whyte still had this £10 million funding gap. And at the same time, the first tier tax tribunal on the EBT was delayed. Now, if it had come before Christmas of 2011, Craig Whyte would have said, nothing to do with me, previous ownership, the club goes into administration, I will take the assets with me to a new company. But both went against him. And the reason the company went into administration was nothing to do with EBT. Basically, Craig Whyte in August of 2011 ran out of money. He just ran out of money, and he withheld money because he just had no more money. So what came out in his trial in 2017, Donald Finlay, now King's Counsel and a Rangers man, inverted commas, made the point that actually if Rangers had qualified in that summer of 2011 against Malmo and Maribor, an additional money, it might have been a different ball game. So I think, and I've read Craig Whyte's book, he was going to try and again, a lot of the contracts in Rangers were Sir David Murray contracts. So there was lots of money going out. I think Craig Whyte said, if I can sort the contracts, if I can get the revenue more than the cost, we could give this a go for 2 or 3 years, and he would have probably sold on. But he was very politically naive. He saw it as another company. He could put a management team. It wasn't. It was Glasgow Rangers. And if he was from Glasgow, why did not he realise that? How very exposed he was going to be to the media. He had terrible PR. And, the documentaries and, he withheld a few things that he shouldn't have done. So he just got off to a terrible start.
Yeah.
So I may give him the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
But I don't think he was a pantomime villain, Derek, that a lot of people made out, because he was found not guilty in court.
Yeah. There have been a number of court cases costing several millions of pounds, isn't there? It really is flabbergasting what it's costed the public overall, isn't it? It's quite staggering.
60 million at the moment or something. I think it was in Holyrood 2 or 3 weeks ago. Personally, what I think happened was, I think because it comes back to this was not just another PLC going into administration and liquidation. I think Salmond was apparently very interested in this story. I think there was, because it was a major pillar of society and institution, I think there was pressure on the police to investigate, because there was a sense that criminality had taken place. What I actually think happened was Strathclyde police watched Mark Daly's documentary and assumed they were all guilty. Strathclyde police arrested the lot. And as we now know, they were not guilty of anything, and that's why they have then sued and got compensation for false arrest. And this is just one part of this story that you think, goodness gracious, what was going on here in the Crown Office in Edinburgh, that they were arresting all these people who basically were innocent. And again, I don't think there were so many different dramas and plots going on in this, and I don't think it reflected very well in the Crown Office. It doesn't, or the police service at the time, Derek. And it's still going on to this day. It's still going on. It's not going away. And one does wonder when it will ever come to an end, this story.
Yeah, it's scandalous. It really is. Charles Green is another that's not on any Rangers fans' Christmas list. I'm sure, Brian, he gets involved after Craig Whyte. In terms of his motives, are you able to understand what he was looking to do?
Why do people take over football clubs? I think there's some ego. I think he wanted to make money. There's nothing wrong with making money. Again, was he going to be about in the long term? What I will say about Charles Green, I'm a leadership scholar and I'm quite interested in this subject. I'm prepared to offer that Charles Green did provide leadership. He was prepared to go toe-to-toe, face-to-face, head-on with the SFA. He managed to restructure, and the structure he introduced we're seeing now, i.e. a football club operated by Sefco Scotland, which became the Rangers Football Club Limited, and he did the IPO towards the end of 2012 to the Rangers International Football Club. The problem with Charles Green was there was a lot of noise surrounding him, and some of his language and some of his associates. And I suggest, Derek, he could have been a bit more, he could have communicated that better, but I think that's football. And I think, we will get characters like this around all football clubs. Now, he was there, he walked away with a few pennies, which is part of this story. I don't think he was ever going to be there for the long term. But, he came in and he gave Duff and Phelps an exit in terms of if the CVA failed, he had a plan to take the club forward, and he did that. And the other bidders at the time, it wasn't very clear. So would I give Charles Green the benefit of the doubt? Well, I've not met the man, but I think there was some leadership there. There was some leadership in terms of he was trying to get the club and what I called what happened here. There was companies that went into decline, there was retrenchment, and there was recovery. The recovery started with Green, and it went on to round about 6th of March 2015, when I actually think the renewal really started. And what I mean by renewal, because we had Rangers men who were businessmen as the board. So Green contributed to a recovery, But then that recovery got a bit messy with Mike Ashley and the various boards. But he was there. Will we see him back in Glasgow again? Probably not. But he's part of the story of this great football club.
Yeah, certainly is. And I mean, 2012, of course, is when Rangers demoted to the bottom tier of Scottish football. Could the governing bodies have done a bit more at that point, Brian? The
Yes.
SFA and SPL, do you reckon?
Absolutely. I would like to think that if they look back on it, I mean, this was a football club that was in distress, absolutely in distress. It needed help. In the same way that we have got duty of care over our employees, I think these governing bodies had a duty of care. Now, in everyone's defence, we hadn't really seen anything like this before, the size of Rangers. But, we're not really seeing, if you look in England at the moment, it would appear to me, and I'm no rugby expert, but, there's clubs in England from Worcester and Wasps are in difficulty, but they don't seem to be getting the same kicking Rangers got.
Yeah.
And I actually think the Rangers fans have a real point here, because I don't think that they were helped that much by the SFA and the SPL and the SFL at the time. I don't think. Now, to go forward, and I've made this point in the book, that I would like to think, in the same way as all the banks nosedived in the global financial crisis, lessons have been learned, particularly in the financial services community in London. I would like to think that because of what happened to Rangers, the governing body, both the SFA and the now SPFL, would probably treat clubs differently. But it did seem at the time there was lots of people quite happy to, as McCoy said, to put the boot in. When Rangers were down, they needed help, and it was nothing to do with the football club. It was corporate mismanagement. And we must not lose sight of the fact that there was many people in that football club lost their jobs. And that was really sad, and players left. And I'll tell you an example of this. When Rangers played in the Champions League this year, there was staff of the football club crying, Derek, because they'd been through the ringer for 10 years, through the absolute ringer. And when I heard that Champions League music, and it's easy to say it was, but no, this was, people's lives were really, really affected. And my next stage of research, what I'd like to do next, Derek, is to try and understand why the corporate mismanagement, the effect that had in people's lives. Real decent folk who all they want to do is go to iBooks and watch their football team, but their lives, and that's where I would like to go next, to understand that a bit more. And I'm very interested in social movements, and I watched from afar as fans group around Rangers were brigading themselves, and they were trying to take the fight to the SFA and SPA. That's brilliant. There's a great story in that. So, wow.
Yeah, well, we look forward to that, Brian, when your teeth stuck into that. I'm going to ask, with regards to this book, of course, you mentioned that you gave a lecture a few weeks ago, Logie Lecture Theatre, am I correct?
Yeah. What I want to do is take... So my job is, we as writers, we try and understand, and we both communicate. You do that as well via the Rangers Review and your colleagues, who I think just do an excellent job. I really do, Derek, you know that. So what I want to do is to try and, it's my responsibility, and I really mean this, I'm no martyr, I'm part funded by the taxpayer, so I believe in terms of public engagement, I should get on my feet and try and explain what I think happened. So I gave a free lecture 2 or 3 weeks ago, and there was people from Greenock, and there was a wonderful man and his wife from the East End of Glasgow who had said, Brian, we've not been in Stirling before, so we thought we'd come and listen to you, and we'll book into a hotel in Stirling. I thought, excellent. So I'm willing to do this, Derek. I just think there's a story. So I got on my feet and I tried to explain what happened. Now, people can like that, they can disagree with it, that's cool, they can agree with it. But I think this is just such an important part of Rangers history. that I'd be willing to do it again. I would absolutely be willing to do it again. So if
Yeah,
the Rangers Review want to do a Rangers Review sponsored lecture, I'd be happy to do it, Derek. Happy to.
Yeah, fantastic, Brian. And the book itself, what's the reaction been like? Have you had much feedback since it's been out?
Huge amount of feedback, actually. It was covered in the Sun, the Herald, the Times, the Express. Clyde too picked up on it immediately. But what's kind of interesting, I've had various direct messages from people who were, one gentleman who said, I worked in the kind of financial service community in Scotland during, he's retired now, and we watched Murray International Holdings for a long time, and we were very concerned all was not well. But the media didn't really pick up on this, and I don't know if we did. And I've had a couple of other people who want to remain nameless, but they said they would like to write more. Particularly, the only thing that I still don't understand, Derek, Craig Whyte was behind Sefco 5088 Limited, and Duff and Phelps said they would sell the football club to 5088 Limited, registered in England, if the CVA failed. The CVA failed and the PLC went into their liquidation process. The football club was then sold to Sefco Scotland Limited. And I'm not quite sure what happened between 5088 Limited and Sefco Scotland Limited. Now, I was told by a very senior lawyer in Glasgow to contact this lawyer who absolutely knows what happens. And I contacted the second lawyer, and it was a man who said, can't go there, Brian. So I've had a couple of, what's been very interesting is a couple of people who, and going back to the public lecture, Derek, the thing my take-home message that night was how many people are still really engaged with this story, and want to know more. So a couple of people said, look, Brian, would you like to write? Would you like to co-author? And I'm going to take that up at the margins. There's a gentleman in detail who we might explore a wee bit more about what happened that summer of 2012, round about the CVA, the Duff and Phelps. And again, I mean, I'm not an accounting or a finance kind of guy. It's just to try and maybe explain again what happened. And it's for historians of Rangers. It's for anyone who's interested in this great football club. So bit of reaction actually, and just a lot of people quite interested. I mean, I'm a boffin, I'm a university professor. What's this guy writing about Rangers? But it comes back to why I think Rangers Review is such a good outlet, because thinking people do like football.
Yeah.
You, me, and your colleagues, and that's why I'm going to say this again without embarrassing you. That's why I think Rangers Review is so good, because you actually provide an intellectual input into this great game. So why can't university professors write about Rangers, try to understand? And quite a lot of reaction actually. The only thing about self-publishing, it's not in the shops. DC Thomson wanted to get into Waterstones.
Yeah.
So at the moment it's only available via Amazon. But that's okay. So as I say, I've never said, Derek, my work is brilliant. I think I've got the key points. It's not a novel, but you might want to dip in and dip out, and there's a bit of history there, there's a bit of facts, and I hope for those who buy the book might think it's okay, Derek.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. And nice words there from you, Brian. We'll get you on more often, I think. Absolutely. But folks, what we'll do is we'll stick the link in the description box as well, so you can go and find Brian's book yourself on Amazon. Rangers Football Club, 1998 to 2015, a descent into chaos, a resultant chaos, and an emergence from chaos. Brian, it's been absolutely brilliant having you on. Thank you very much for having a chat with us.
Derek, you're just very welcome. And actually, can I just say that the emergence from chaos, what we saw at the AGM yesterday was because of that emergence from chaos, because Green did offer a company that operated the club, and Green was responsible for the Rangers International Football Club PLC in terms of the IPO rather. So what we saw yesterday was actually part of that emergence. So it's all linked. But no, Derek, my pleasure. Good talking to you, and thank you very much. And my regards to you and all your subscribers for the forthcoming Christmas holiday. And it would be good to continue with this conversation at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Brian. It's been a